Okay, you're all set to begin.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll call the Monday, April 24th, 2023 meeting of the Community Preservation Committee to order. I'll call the roll. Terry Duranus.
Here.
Marilyn Fifield. Deb Converse. Catherine Garofoli.
Here.
Tom Lee.
Here.
Farley Lewis.
Here.
Steve Robichaud.
Here.
James Tenalia. James, are you here? Don't see him yet, but we have enough to start. So I'll read the notice. Please note that tonight's meeting is recorded and broadcast on Channel 18 and in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. The chair must inquire whether anyone is taping this meeting and to please make their presence known. Anyone taping? Lucy, you have your hand up. Are you taping? And you're muted. So I take it you're not taping. All right. Moving into the items, we'll have a discussion on approval of the draft meeting minutes from March 20th, 2023. Any corrections, additions, anything? Seeing none?
Nope.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Tom Lee seconds. I'll call the roll. Terry Duanus.
Yes.
Marilyn Fifield, have you joined us, Marilyn? No? Deb
Yes.
Converse.
Yes,
You're here, Marilyn? All right.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Saved by the bell. Catherine Garofoli.
Yes.
Tom Lee.
Yes.
Farley Lewis.
Yes.
Steve Robichaud.
Yes.
James Tenalia. James, you muted?
Yeah, he's muted. He's on a phone.
James? Well, we'll pass on him. And Lindsay Council votes yes. All right. Minutes are approved. We received no letters of intent this month. So we'll move right into applications. And the first application is from the trustees of reservations with an updated application that has been received requesting $170,000 in community preservation recreation funds for the creation of the Children's Play Garden at Armstrong Kelly Park, Osterville, located at 675 Main Street, Osterville, map 141, parcel 038. Interpretive signage is proposed to invite visitors to engage with the garden and to acknowledge CPA fundings for its creation. The funding request represents a portion of the total Armstrong Kelly Park rehabilitation project in the amount of $1,425,000 with $1,255,000 committed. A recorded recreation restriction will be required. Who do we have here from trustees for this?
Lindsay,
Yes.
before you start, I need to recuse myself.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Tom.
Good evening, everyone. Elizabeth Curie-Soul here from the trustees, project manager, and representative. And I'm here tonight with my colleague, Jennifer Du Bois, who's the managing director of conservation. So I want to clarify for the committee that we are in front of you all tonight with a application that is intended to replace the application that had been approved by the committee in 2022. This is not an additional request for funds, it's a revision. And the scope of the request is very much the same as was before, except that we have removed the request to support the walkway, the walkways throughout the park as part of this scope. So this is, as Chairman Council noticed, this is a request for $170,000. So in our application, I did include updated drawings from our landscape architects who are the designers of the children's garden. And it very much is in keeping with what had been shown in our original application. It's a nature-based, site-specific children's play garden. It's intended to be used by all visitors of all ages and inviting them to really experience the landscape in a really playful and engaging way. I also included in our application locations for the interpretive signage that Chairman Council noted, and that's going to be more of a written invitation for engaging with the space, as well as acknowledging the hopeful CPA funding. And I believe that that's the only sort of change from our original application, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the updated design of the garden or the application itself.
Question from members regarding this? I was out there today, as a matter of fact. I happen to be in Osterville, and there's quite a bit of work going on, I'll tell you.
It's going to be a really transformational project.
Yes, I couldn't really identify where the children's play area was going to be. So I did see some orange flagging, but other than that, I couldn't really tell. But I think a site visit would be in order so people understand what we're approving over there. This is quite a change from the last application.
So it's actually in the same location as when we met on site last summer. And that flagging is the layout of the pathway as it runs through the garden.
Oh, okay. That's why it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's very difficult to tell.
Oh, where you are, yes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's in the same location that we had discussed prior. And it's the same, general size and layout.
Okay. Members, questions for this? All right, well, I'd like to get folks out there to see what this is in difference from the remainder of what we are not approving, which, given the current shape out there, would be good, actually. We will require the permanent restriction, which I understand the lawyers are working on. I don't think it's been agreed upon.
Lindsay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I do have my colleague here, Jennifer Du Bois, who we wanted to just discuss the verbiage that was included in the agenda item. Is that something that you all would want to discuss now?
Sure, you can discuss it right now.
Okay. I'll invite my colleague Jennifer to speak.
Hello. So it's our understanding that the lawyers have been talking about a way to secure the town's CPA commitment on this project, and that for recreation projects where we are creating a play area, the CPA legislation doesn't require a permanent restriction. But we certainly agree with the town that the trustees' mission is to keep this property open for the public's use and enjoyment, that we do not intend to charge any entrance fees, and that we will maintain this children's play area for, and replace components as needed. So I think what we wanted to discuss is or understand is whether the CPC is asking for this restriction kind of above and beyond what the legislation requires, or if we would be able to have our attorneys create draft a legal instrument, whether it's a restriction, whether it's an MOU, whether it's a license agreement that kind of codifies this intent that the property be open to the public for recreation and not, et cetera, and not charge an entrance fee.
That's precisely what needs to happen. We need to have this agreement in place before we can release any funds. So there's a bit of lawyering to do. And this is why I want people to see the site, what they're agreeing to, where the access is going to be, that kind of thing. We even though the language is not specific in the act regarding recreation, we are still able to do up to a 30-year restriction. We'd like to get them in perpetuity, all of them. $170,000 is a lot of money for the people of the town of Barnstable. So once that language is worked out, we can get together. You'll have a better idea of where things are going out there, and we can, see it staked out, and then we'll all be in agreement as what we're approving and not approving and what's involved.
Okay.
Any members with questions regarding that? Go ahead,
Lindsay,
Steve.
no, not a question, but just that was the primary item for me as well, is, what type of restriction are we dealing with here? And, what's it going to mean? Because that's what we always look for, with any similar requests. So I'm glad we're looking into this and looking forward to learning.
Great, thanks. Farley?
Yeah, just curious, what are we actually funding? Are we putting money into materials, labor? I'm just curious, that's all.
Thank you for your question. So it's basically for all of the materials, the acquisition of the materials and the construction of the garden itself. So we are funding the design of the garden, which of course is in process right now. And so the application, $170,000, and hopefully this is better laid out in the budget that was included in the application, is for the construction of the park itself.
I have a quick question on the construction. Will it include any type of protective surface that they're requiring of these types of playgrounds now? What will that be? Will it be wood chips or?
Yes. So according to our designers, only basically one area will need to have this, play surfacing, and it's basically a mulch material. It's a mulch-like material that has a certain substrate to it. And that's only in areas that have a certain height associated with them. So if children climb onto something that's of a certain height or could fall from a certain height, then
Right.
you're required to have that mulch material in those areas. So that should be included in the drawings, the exact scope of what's happening there.
Okay. Catherine?
I have a question about signage. So for people visiting the children's play area with small children, is it going to be obvious to them that the kids can play on these natural structures, or is there going to be any signage letting them know that this is an option? Because I feel like, knowing myself as a parent and walking through a newly manicured park area, that something like that would be a question mark in my head. So I'd like to know how the trustees will be engaging people to do more experiential learning in this space.
Absolutely. So certainly the design of the garden itself, our designers are play structure designers. They're really interactive nature play garden designers. So hopefully the design of the garden itself will be very invitational. There clearly will be boulders and tree trunks and stuff that will be very invitational and playfully constructed. And then also we're including the interpretive signage. And so that's maybe talking a little bit more about the intention of the garden, maybe how it could be used by visitors. And then on top of that, there are plans to program both the garden, the larger garden, as well as the children's garden. And those would be, we would have an engagement manager who would play with the kids or have holding certain programs in that space. And so that would be another sort of invitation for engagement as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Terry?
I think that the corporation has done a great job in terms of kind of tailoring the project to the needs that we have as far as the Community Preservation Committee. I'm curious though, is it going to be restricted or necessarily restricted to no charge for people to join? Or it seems to me that we could fund, and I'm asking this more for subsequent, projects too, there can be, we could fund something that has a cost associated to it, correct? I don't think that's part of our restriction.
That's a good question. I think what they're referring to is like programming. You know, you may
Sure.
give $3 to go to a program. Sure, that's not a big deal, you know, to cover the cost of materials. I think what we're generally saying is in the open times when it's when there's no functions there, that it would just be open to the public to use as use the walking trails, use the children's area,
Great.
or maybe buy lunch across the street, you know, at the market. So we wouldn't get into the details of the operational details, because we would also allow, if the trustees wanted to have an event, they
Sure.
could, you know, close the park for a Saturday afternoon and do a gardening event where they, you know, host some types of talks. So
Mhm.
it's a flexible arrangement. It's like a baseball field, you know, it's like the Harbor Hawks field. They have a primary use over the summer period. The schools use it in the off period, and pickup leagues and stuff make up the difference. So we don't get into time restraints for use, I don't think.
Great.
Anyone else? Questions? So we already have the application. So this would be to accept the application and basically inform the legal department to work this agreement out. That's got to happen first. And once we're agreed on that, if we want to look at signage or, you know, those kinds of things, we can. And then, as I said, I'd like to do a site visit so people know what we're getting into here. It's going to be a different kind of project than we've done before. Particularly your parents could help when you see things like this signage and understanding what these things are, because these are quite unique. Many people might walk through there and not know what that pile of logs is for. Well, it's meant to build a shelter to show people that, you know, these things, you know, take work, and it's an adventure for them. So that's one of the things that we picked up on earlier is clear signage, and we need a commitment to maintain that. So those kinds of things. So there's nothing really for us to do. We accept the application, work out the agreement, and then we can schedule up a site visit and get a final vote, which we would then send to the council for final approval. Is everyone clear?
That sounds good.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Jennifer,
very
for coming
much.
in.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Now we're moving to discussion, and we have Pastor Angela Menke-Ballou of the Clearwater Federated Church to have a discussion regarding CPAC options for their project. You're on.
No, Lindsay,
Yes.
we have to back up and do Sturgis Library.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jumped right over Sturgis. How about that? Lucy won't be happy with me on that.
Oh, my
Lucy,
goodness.
you're on. And this is the best project because you're actually saving money here. This is a good one.
Right. Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Lucy. I apologize for that.
That's okay. As you saw on the agenda, we came in about $40,000 under our projected budget for our building project. You granted us 100, correct me if I'm wrong, 165? Is that right, Lindsay?
Yes.
Yes.
So we were about $40,000 under budget because of some savings by doing repairs rather than replacement and a couple of other things. During the course of the project, we realized that our archival climate control system is kind of at the end of its age. It's hard to get parts for it. And that's one of the most important pieces of equipment we have in the library. Protect our archives. It keeps it at a continual temperature and humidity control so that the documents and photographs and other items in our archives are protected. So I asked Lindsay if the committee would consider using the funding that was left over to replace that piece of equipment, which is vital to our whole preservation program. He said, go out and get 3 estimates. We got 2, and every other person we contacted said, we can't give you an estimate, we're too busy, you know. Anyway, this went on for probably 8 months, I think, Lindsay.
Yes, at least.
Finally, he said, you know, let's go for it. We did our due diligence. We contacted probably 7 or 8 contractors, and we got 2 estimates out of them. And luckily, the lowest estimate was from the contractor that we already use. So I would like to request that the money for that project, which is a little over $34,000, be transferred over to this climate control system replacement.
There you have it. The actual number, Lucy, is 33,204 that you included in
Good,
your
yeah.
letter.
So we got a couple of higher, that one other higher estimate was over 34, so.
So for clarity to the members, this would be an approval of the reauthorization of the unspent funds. We would make that recommendation to the council. The council would approve it, and then they could go and perform the work. There is already a historic preservation restriction from their first project on this, so that's in place. And but it does require the 2 votes, one of CPC and one of the council, to reauthorize the funds. Okay, any questions on this? Thoughts? Seeing none on that, well, I'd take a motion to approve the $33,204
So moved.
for the.
Can
Is that you, Mr. Lee?
Yes.
can I make a clarification?
Sure.
We got this estimate probably 6 to 8 months ago. It takes almost a year for the equipment to be ordered and delivered. So in that period of time, that price may change. So maybe you could do it to, you know, up to the 40,000, just in case. And if it's not, we won't ask for it, but I didn't know whether that's an option for you.
Actually, that's a very good idea, given that there's 40 in the budget, right?
Just
Remaining. We could authorize up to 40,000. You could use what you have and return the rest.
Right.
So that would be the motion then, folks.
So
Any
moved.
discussion?
Nope.
Tom has
Second.
moved. Is there a second? That was Catherine. Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone's clear what they're voting? As I said, this will go to the council after us, and once you have that, Lucy, you'll be good to go. After the 30-day waiting period, of course.
Of course.
Everyone's clear? I see no hands. Terry Duenas,
Yes.
Marilyn Fifield,
Yes, yes.
Catherine Garofoli,
Yes.
Tom Lee,
Yes.
Farley Lewis,
Yes.
Stephen Robichaud,
Yes.
James Tenalia,
Yes.
and Lindsay Council votes yes. All right, thank you very much, Lucy. Keep us posted as you go forward, and we'll let you know as soon as we get on a council agenda.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And thank you for all your support over the years.
You're very welcome.
All
Thank
right,
you.
good night.
Okay. Now we go to discussion and pass to Angie. For the Katuitt Federated Church, it requested its discussion regarding options for preservation restriction related to the Katuitt Federated Church's CPA grant. You're on.
Wonderful. Thank you all for having me again. Ellen, I believe that you have a set of our presentation. If you want to launch that.
It was sent to Sarah in the channel.
Sarah, I'm
18.
sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So we were we'd met with you and you sent us back to the Mass Historical Commission and they have sent us back to you. So I just wanted to share tonight's objectives. To remind all of you of what was approved by this committee and by the Barnstable Town Council. And to share with you what's taken place since the last time we met with you in October. And to share with you the consequences that we would experience if we're not able to receive these funds, and to request your guidance and help in our next steps. Next slide, please. I'm just going to remind you that you have approved just under $180,000. That work was to cover our exterior shingles on the building as it stood before our construction project began. Our historical windows that were not related to religious imagery, the fire protection system, and moving the front sanctuary entrance, as well as making it accessible. And that was approved unanimously by this committee on February 22nd, 22, and it was approved unanimously by the Barnstable Town Council on May 5th, 2022. Next slide. Just wanted to share with you, here is a picture of the building as it was in 1913 the sanctuary was built in 1901. The exterior building was built in 1913. And you can see that we've returned to the tighter exposure of shingles as seen in this historic photo. And we've been really proud of the work that they've been doing, and people in the village have commented that the shingles have been woven on the corners, and the attention to detail has been really great. Next slide, please.
Because I mean, I could do a Teams meeting tomorrow morning. If that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Teams meeting. Thanks.
And the historic windows, we had shared that some of those were behind a wall so that light could not go through them. That's seen in the top middle picture. And some were stored in the attic for 82 years. But these were original to the 1901 building. And in our design, we found places to return all of them. All of them have been coming back to their original orientation, to the Cotuit Village Green. And you can see on either side in this slide what the colors look like. They're extraordinarily beautiful. We also uncovered a story, the diamond-shaped window that you see on the right. We discovered that it was given in honor of Oliver Dottridge, who's one of the descendants of where the Cotuit Historical and Santuit Historical Society is. And Oliver was lost at sea when he was 21 years old. And our church does a lot of ministry with families that have lost a child. And so we learned of Oliver's story, how he was lost at sea in a shipwreck with his own father, who was the captain of the ship. One other person perished with him. 3 people survived. And we've found Oliver's grave at Mosswood Cemetery, and it says, "Our darling Ollie, how we loved him." And we think that this uncovered story from history will be a blessing for families who are experiencing grief. And it's just one of many stories that we've uncovered in doing our building expansion to honor our history and help it become alive for both the congregation and for the village and beyond. And I will say that Oliver's great nieces and nephews are members of the churchate, and they did not know that this window was given in his honor when it was hidden behind a wall. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we were requested when we went before the Barnstable Historic Commission was to retain the pediment of this door. And so you'll see on the left what it looked like before construction began. And on the right, what it looks like today. We still haven't gotten the shingles finished, but we are moving closer and closer to having all of the shingling done. But you can see how we have retained that look, and we're so grateful that that they are back in place. And the originally our entrance to the sanctuary faced School Street. So this is in a different location, but it is returning to its original orientation of the entrance and maintaining the 1941 doors in the original orientation. Next slide, please. So we worked on the restriction document from May of 22 when this was approved by the Barnstable Town Council. We spent many months drafting our restrictions document under the guidance that we got from the town attorney. We were informed that this process could take time, but we were never informed that a denial of our grant was possible once it had been passed by the Barnstable Town Council. On September 22nd, 22, we were informed that the Mass Historical Commission was denied. We had several communications trying to meet with Mass Historical Commission on how to resolve this. We offered many times to have a conversation with them. And on February 3rd, we received a letter from Mass Historical Commission that they would not grant us a restrictions document. This decision was made without a conversation or presentation from us, and it was made without a site visit to our location. Next slide, please. So some of the consequences of not receiving this grant, based on the unanimous approval of the grant that we received from you and from the town council, we moved forward, and all of those pieces have now almost been complete. You saw that the door is still a little bit in process. We included this CPC grant as a part of our budget, and now we have an unanticipated gap of $180,000 that we need to offset. We had originally, when we started our project, opened a bank loan as a safety net, which we never intended to use, but the interest rates have changed dramatically since that has happened. And we have to this date not taken any money in our building project. But if we were to now, we would incur an 8.5% interest rate on that loan. If we drew from the loan and paid back over 20 years, we would incur $195,000 in interest, which is more than the grant that you have approved for us, causing us to now have to raise $375,000. Next slide, please. Just some notes that we wanted to share. I sent you an email outlining our timeline. It took several days to go back through just the meetings that I've had with all of the different groups in order to get this grant approved. And that does not even reflect the amount of time that we spent writing, working with a grant writer, involving our congregation in gathering the information required for the grant. We modified our building project to accommodate the guidance and instructions that we received from this CPC and the Barnstable Historic Commission. And those adjustments cannot be changed now because they've been completed. We delayed our project for items that were covered by the grant and incurred increased expenses due to this delay and impacted the village by a longer time of having our building unfinished. We've explored options of receiving the required restriction through this body and through the Mass Historical Commission with no resolution. And as a clergy person, I was having breakfast with a few of my colleagues, and I found that this was a common problem, that people were not able to receive their restriction document without involving their local politician to move it forward. And I found out that First Church Sandwich, they had been working on their restriction document since 2007. They had to involve legal counsel in order to have their funds released. I also have been in touch with clergy colleagues across the state and found that there's a lot of uneven practice of how these restriction documents are administered and what's required for things to be released. So, for example, First Church Sandwich received the funds that were approved for them in 2007 because they did not have to have a restriction document completed in order to receive the funds. But then they were not able to apply for future grants. And the same in Western Mass. Several of my colleagues have been able to receive their funds without a restrictions document being complete. Next slide, please. So some of the options presented to us were Michael Steinitz, who is the person that we've been in communication with from the Mass Historical Commission, encouraged us to come back to the town and to see if the town would hold our restriction document. And again, we've drafted the restriction document. We are a willing partner in having a restriction held on our building. And we would love to resolve this moving forward. We're committed to the building being used as a church and to serve the community. And also in talking with Jessica, she said that there were some funds that you have that are designated. And so we wondered if it was possible to have our funds come from undesignated rather than historical preservation. So we just didn't know if that was possible. Next slide, please. So I'm a preacher, so I don't mean to be too preachy, but there's this story from the Gospel of Luke where Jesus tells the story about this widow who comes to the door of an unjust judge, and she knocks and knocks and knocks on the door, and the judge denies her justice. And she keeps coming back and keeps knocking at the door. And the judge says, even though I have no regard for people or for God, because this woman's wearing me out, I'm going to grant her petition. So this is just a little confession that I am the widow, and we are going to keep coming back and looking for the justice that we feel like we deserve in receiving this grant fund that already has been approved. And we just want to have the funds released. So that's it for our presentation, and we'd love to receive any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I want to clarify one point that you made. Undesignated merely refers to funds that are not set aside in the initial 10% funding that the state requires. In other words, 10% of our funds has to be dedicated to the areas of the program. That's open space and recreation, historic, and community housing. The other 70% is put into this bucket called undesignated. But once it's transferred out to a project, it has to follow the guidelines of that project. So there's no loose funds that we can just hand out. It has to be fit towards the criteria of the 4 categories. So that's a little bit of a misunderstanding.
Yeah, we're just still always trying to learn about this process.
Yes. And the other thing is that, and we were briefed on this at our last Community Preservation Committee meeting, the reason there are so many different sets of rules around that you've discovered is because of the 200 plus communities. Each community is allowed to set up its own rules for how they dispense the funds. You can set up requirements for restrictions, for different things that you want to see included. You can exclude certain things. We don't, we didn't want to get into areas of like building a lot of lightings on projects or exterior things that are sort of not basic needs. We try to stick to basic needs as opposed to frilly things like fancy park lighting or, you know, those types of things. So those are the areas that we're able to actually adjust at each committee to fit the needs of that. So just those clarifications. Any questions from members? Seeing none, I'll ask if there's any folks from the public that want to speak to this. Have a question about anything? Seeing none, I see a lot of people here. Nobody.
No, there is. There's Amy Fish has her hand raised beside me here.
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
Hi there. Thank you for your time. My name is Amy Fish. I'm currently serving as the co-moderator overseeing the entire church. And I apologize, my video is in and out. I'm actually in the car coming home from visiting my son on the building committee. And I'd just like to express my gratitude for your help with this process so far. We're dedicated to, as Angie said, being the persistent widow and getting these funds that have been approved released to us. And just on a personal note regarding the doors, I'm just so thrilled that we're able to retain these original doors while having them be accessible to all people by reorienting to the original position facing the street. And that allows us to have a ramp so that all people can access these doors, not just those who are able to climb stairs. I'm also happy to answer any questions at any time, and my contact information can be found through the church office. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this matter? Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, all. Thank you for your time tonight and hearing our concerns with the release of these funds. I recently read the letter from the Mass Historical Committee, and they spent 80% of the letter talking about exactly how the building did conform to the historical guidelines. They mentioned the doors, they mentioned the shingles, they mentioned the L shape of the building. And they said, although it is modest in size, it does still conform to the guidelines. I think our building team and our pastor have spent an enormous amount of time making sure that they do conform to these requirements. And I hope that, I know that you had voted to give your approval as well as the town council. And I hope that we can continue to find a way to move forward with these grant funds, because as Pastor Angie mentioned, it did present quite a hardship for this project. And this building is so important to our community. It can serve the needs of so many, especially now with the new community hall in place, and bringing back all of the historical elements that Pastor Angie outlined were not only part of the charm of the building, but what helped it be so widely accepted, not only by the congregation, but the whole community and the neighbors of this building. So I appreciate your time tonight, your thoughtful consideration and your guidance in helping us move forward with this.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Let's see any hands raised. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay, and thank you for the committee. Jennifer Lochran, resident of Katuitt and also a congregation member. I think as Angie and I working together and coming in front of you several times, and as Angie has noted, we're going to continue with this journey. I think at this point, I pose a question to you and to the rest of the committee members is, we feel like we've been bounced back and forth between this committee and Mr. Steinich's office, that it's like a ping pong game right now. And we really would like to know what options do we have? If you say go back to the state, we know he's going to send us back to you. So I'd like to hear what the committee has to suggest or any, I know there's a couple of town councilors that are on this session as well. And thank you again.
Thank you. Members, any questions, comments? Any of our councilors like to speak to this? Go ahead, Catherine.
Sort of have the same question. What do we do from here? Like, do we have town council, like the lawyer come and speak with us about this matter? Like, what do we do?
What would be required is us for change our rules of the committee to allow for private restrictions, which currently we do not allow. You need to have a preservation restriction from the Mass Historical Commission to receive funding. Currently, we do not allow that.
Yeah, and Lindsay, just to add to that, I mean, this is, unfortunately, I don't think this is a situation where it's just kind of convincing this board to change our opinion. We have to operate within our rules, or else we are doing a disservice to the town, even though in doing so, we're unable to do what feels to be right. And that's difficult. It's very difficult. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Stephen.
Lindsay,
Anyone? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, there was a comment at one point that the way I took it was this was us trying to slight a religious organization, which is not the case at all. We've granted a number of these to a number of different religious organizations. They just happen to have the history and were approved no problem through the state. So it's not that this board is trying to slight you or not give you the money. We've already voted to pass this a few times. So I just want to clarify that we give to religious organizations, not because they are religious, but because they have history. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Jim. Did I see, Angie, did you have your hand up? Go ahead.
I did. I just wanted to say that I linked a document to the long email that I sent you. And this was, it's an article that's sourced from the Cape Cod Commission Roundtable fact sheet. And I reviewed the presentation that you had from the lawyer last month. And I just wanted to lift up what this document says. And also, I think it is consistent with what you heard from your legal counsel last month. The Community Preservation Act specifically calls for perpetual preservation restrictions established under Chapter 184 of Mass General Law whenever CPC funds are used to purchase a real estate property interest. Therefore, when purchasing or buying an interest in a historic property, the preservation restriction is required. And then this is the sentence that I want you to hear. The act is not specific as to whether a preservation restriction is required when CPA money is expended on a historical preservation project. And so I just want to highlight that we are not purchasing this property, which it does say that you would have to have a perpetual preservation restriction, but we are restoring it. And it seems like there's a little difference of understanding about if it's required in the same way.
No, there's no misunderstanding. Again, we can adopt rules that are consistent with the Act, and this is one of them. We're requiring all of our historic preservation projects to have a historic restriction. This partners us with the state and gives us some backup to enforce these restrictions, to enforce the various components of it, which is maintenance and upkeep of the building, for example. Without that, the town has to do it, on its own. And so far, since 2006, the town has been not willing to hold private restrictions. And the other thing that it does, having a restriction enables you to be eligible for other state and federal funding, which has been very successful for our groups that have been able to acquire a restriction. So we are able to restrict it, as we mentioned, by a perpetual restriction in return for the funds. And that's what we've done with every other project. Yes, to get it restricted. And so with every other project we've done, and we've done dozens, yours is the only one to be denied, and that's unfortunate. And, you know, I can see you all aren't happy about it, but that's just the way that the group has decided to disperse its funds.
Lindsay.
Terry.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
Go ahead, Terry.
I just have, I'm just unsure of why the Mass Historical Commission rejected the our restriction.
Because this building's been altered so many times that it doesn't have the historic character anymore. If you look at the picture that she showed at the beginning, those were the original buildings. It doesn't look anything like that anymore.
Okay.
And I just want to say that we presented what we were going to do before we even broke ground, before we even presented to the Historical Commission. And so we came before this board before any of that was done to see if we would qualify. And we were told that we would. And so that's why we went through this process and we budgeted based on being approved. So
then that's why the final step is to get approval by the state for the restriction. You decided to go forward with your work and, you know, you weren't approved. So you were going to do the work anyway, regardless of our approval or not. So, you know, you're in a tough spot, but you weren't approved. So you took the risk and you didn't get approved. It's that simple. The building has been altered far too often to hold its historic value, and that they made very clear in the Mass Historic information that they sent along. And it's not included in the 2 historic districts in Katuitt because of those alterations. So it just doesn't pass muster.
Marilyn has her hand up, Lindsay.
Okay. I can't see Marilyn. Where is she? Go ahead, Marilyn.
Right. Hi. May I say 3 things? One, I think we're all sorry, certainly. I think we have all learned something from this. And returning to the Massachusetts Historical Commission letter of September 20th, 2022, addressed to Barbara Harris, attorney, Michael Steinitz said, in the opinion of MHC staff, the work being undertaken does not meet the rehabilitation standards of the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. And he said, he reminded that this is a cited standard required not only for the historic preservation restriction, but also specified as the standard for rehabilitation as defined by the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, which is the Community Preservation Act. So it does not meet the standard for historic preservation rehabilitation funding under the Community Preservation Act.
Okay, thank you. So that's where we're at. And I don't see a motion coming forward, so that is where we're at. Catherine, do you hand up? No? All right, well, thank you for coming in. That's it from us. So unless anyone's got any more comments, anyone out there? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. That would be the correspondence, and we did get the 2 letters from Angela regarding the Katuitt Federated Church. That was the only correspondence received this month. And from there, we'll go to project updates. The Unitarian Church of Barnstable CPC application was approved at the April 6, 2023 Town Council public hearing. That was their 3rd application that was approved, and that has been approved by the council. Phase 3 and Phase 4 application from the Department of Public Works were approved at the April 6th meeting as well. So that planning process will go forward. And we're still on track for a January 2024, can't believe I'm saying that, start for the bikeway. So that would be the start of Phase 3. The Barnstable Recreation Playground is scheduled for the public hearing on the 27th. That's the little playground next to the tennis courts by the old Barnstable Elementary School. And we'll look forward to seeing that project get underway. And we have commissioned the appraisal for 2320 Meeting House Way. That is in. we are still waiting for a final draft report on the water production capability. And we have not yet, I've talked to a couple people, but we have not yet found anyone to do a review for the site for community housing. That may actually cost significant money as well. So I think before I go forward with that, I'd have to bring it back to you all. It's not going to be just a few $1,000.
Who's looking at that, Lindsay? Did you go to Hack or did you go to?
I asked around and got a name from a couple of people, and they're not available. One of them actually had done work for these owners, so he had to recuse himself. So I need to find another contractor. If you know anyone who does affordable housing that develops, could give us an overview on something like that, that would be great.
I do know somebody. I'll give you their name afterwards.
That'd be great. We don't want a real in-depth thing, but things like previous perk test, access. There's an accessibility problem with this site. Different things need to be looked at to make sure that we're on solid ground when we make some decisions. So we have that. And let's see. Oh, yes, we go on to the meeting format. Ellen, could you give us an update on that? What's the current status of meetings?
Meetings,
CPC meetings, can we allow to go Zoom still, or do we have to go back to public?
Yes, we are. We've been going meeting to meeting. We've been deciding at the prior meeting what the format will be for the next meeting. And we are allowed.
Yes, I understand that. We're allowed to continue Zoom meetings?
Yes.
So what do you want to do next month, folks?
So Lindsay, the governor has signed the extensions of the COVID-19 open meeting law exemptions to March 31st, 2025. So
2025, so another year.
2 years.
2 years,
So-
25, that's right.
Yeah, so it's up to each individual board and commissions to decide which way that they want to meet.
Well, let's meet virtually for May, and then we know the June meeting will be our annual meeting. That'll be in person.
Right.
How's that sound? Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
We have a date of the 21st for the annual meeting. And the committee's still working on speakers and such, but
Lindsay,
okay, so
we're going to have two. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. There'll be two meetings in June. There's a dedicated annual meeting and then a regular meeting.
You know what? We aren't going to do them all on the same night?
We
Why
don't
not?
have it that way. We could if you want to, but it's on a Wednesday. The date is a
Oh,
Wednesday.
all right. Yeah, that's right. That's what it was. I guess we'll have to stick with that then. Any member comments on that?
What would it take for us to have the meetings on the same night?
What we've done in the past is have I forget what we did. We do the regular meeting first and then have the annual meeting. Is that what we've done?
No, the
I
other
think
way
that's what-
around.
Had the annual meeting and then the regular. We could do it that way. We could have the regular meeting after the annual meeting.
I would think that it would make more sense for all the committee members if we just met.
Yeah.
At one
No, I
time.
agree. Let's
All
do
right,
that.
let's do that. Let's put that out there, particularly for Deb, who's not here, but we'll meet virtually for the May meeting and have a dual meeting in June.
Ellen, is
Ellen?
that going to cause a problem for you?
Yeah.
It doesn't. It would have to be the Wednesday though, because we didn't do it on that Monday for a reason. I think maybe the planning board comes in behind us. But Wednesday was wide open. If that's okay. Wednesday was wide open.
I think Wednesday's okay. We can just make sure that there's a headliner or something that people know we're meeting on an
Yeah.
off night.
I can just change it in Outlook and on the calendar if you want to decide to do both on that night.
What do you think, members?
Yes, why not just let do both meeting on the same night so we don't have to come back over a second time. Also, I would suggest to go to the remote in July and August so that Ellen has all those 3 or 4 months in advance.
remote July and August? Everyone okay with that?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's do it. All right. Excuse me. Well, that's all I had. Did I miss anything? Seeing none. Any other discussion? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion regarding adjournment? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Terry Duenas,
Yes.
Marilyn Fifield,
Yes.
Catherine Garofoli,
Yes.
Tom Lee,
Yes.
Farley Lewis,
Yes.
Stephen Robichaud,
Yes.
James Tenalia,
Yes.
and Lindsay Council votes yes. Thank you very much, folks.
Okay.
And we will
Thank
see
you.
you in
Thank
just
you.
a few weeks.
All right.
Yes.